We continue now at the top of Daf Zayin Amud Aleph and Meseches Rosh Hashana. This is Rosh Hashana Daf 16a. The Mishnah says, Be'arba Parakim, in 4 times during the year, Ha'olam Nido, and the world is judged. Ba'Pesach al Hatfu, on Pesach there's a judgment for the grain. Ba'Atzeres al Peiros Ha'ilan, on Shavuos there's a judgment for the fruit of the trees. Ba'Rosh Hashana, on Rosh Hashana, Kol Boy Olam, over in Lefanov, Kivnei Maron, all of the world passes before him, before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kivnei Maron, that's going to be explained in the Gemara. Shenemar, like the Pasuk says, Hayotzer Yachad Libam HaMeven al Kol Ma'aseyim. The reference here to this Pasuk as well will be explained in the Gemara. Uvechag Nidonin al Hamayim, and on Sukkos we are judged on water, on the rainfall. The Gemara says, Hey Tvua, which grain are we talking about when we say that on Pesach the grain is judged? Ileimu haTvua dekayim, if you say that we're talking about the grain that is right in front of us, meaning the grain that's attached to the ground, that's ready to be harvested, Kolhani harpatki diadu Allah, all of the things that have happened to this grain until now, Amos itin, when was that judgment? And so the Gemara says, Ella rather tvua de mizdara. What we're talking about over here is the grain that is going to be planted in the coming Mar Cheshvan. But the Gemara still says, Lemeimra dechadina mistina. Does that mean to say that the judgment for grain is just a one-time judgment? Vatanya, but we learned in a brisa, tvua sheira bokarionis. Let's say you have grain where there's some incident happens or some accident happens. So kodem haPesach, if that happens before Pesach, nidonis l'sha'aver, then you know the judgment happened on the last Pesach. In other words, if something occurs to grain before Pesach, so you know the judgment about that incident must have happened on the previous Pesach. L'achar Pesach, and if something happens after Pesach, so nidonis lahaba, so it happened after Pesach, so you know that particular judgment came on this previous Pesach, on this most recent Pesach. And the Brisa says similarly, Adam, let's say you have a person, She'irabo karionis, let's say an incident happens or an accident happens to him, Kodem Yom HaKippurim, Nidon L'Shavar, again, if it happens before Yom Kippur, you know he was judged on the previous Yom Kippur. La'achar Yom HaKippurim, if the incident happens after Yom Kippur, Nidon L'Haba, so then again, you know it happened on the most recent Yom Kippur. So the point over here is that the judgment is constant, it doesn't happen only one time. And so the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Shmami no, you see from this, Trei Dinim Mistana, that there actually are 2 judgments, there's different judgments on the grain as it goes through different stages each year. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Hilkach, therefore, Ki chazi inish de mitzlach zara afla. Let's say a person sees that the things that he planted that take a long time to ripen, they plant early on. Let's say he sees that those are successful. So l'kadim v'lizra charfa, he should get up and he should plant things that are going to grow very quickly before the next judgment. Because before the next judgment comes, he's obviously already had a good judgment at the last judgment, so quickly plant some other things that are going to grow, and they'll be all finished before the next judgment. And the Gemara continues, Mani Mas Nisan, who is the author of our Mishnah? Lo Rabbi Meir, velo Rabbi Yehuda, velo Rabbi Yossi, velo Rabbi Nasan. It doesn't seem to follow Rabbi Meir, doesn't seem to follow Rabbi Yehuda, doesn't seem to follow Rabbi Yossi, doesn't seem to follow Rabbi Nasan. The Tanyas we learned in a Brisa, Hakol Nidonim b'Rosh Hashana, everything is judged on Rosh Hashana, Ugzar Din Shalahem Nechtam b'Yom HaKippurim, and the Gzar Din, meaning the final judgment, it is sealed on Yom Kippur, Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. So you don't have all these different times of judgment, there's one time of judgment, Rosh Hashana, and then it's sealed on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hakol Nidonim b'Rosh Hashana, everything is judged on Rosh Hashana. Ugzar Din Shalohem Nechtam Kol Echad V'Echad B'Zmano, but the final judgment, which is sealed, that happens in each in its appropriate time. By Pesach al Atvu, on Pesach, there's the final judgment or the sealed judgment for grain. Bo'atzeres al Peiros Ha'ilon, on Shavuos, that's the final judgment, the sealed judgment for the fruits of the trees. B'chag Nidon al Hamayim, on Sukkos, that is relevant to the water, to the rainfall. V'yadam, when it comes to a person, Nidon b'Rosh Hashana, he's judged on Rosh Hashana. Ugzar Din Shalo Nechtam b'Yom HaKippurim, and the final judgment is sealed on Yom Kippur. So again, you see, it's not Rabbi Yehuda either, because Rabbi Yehuda says it's the final, the sealed judgment that happens at these various times, but in the initial judgment, it all happens on Rosh Hashana. And the Brisa continues, Rabbi Yossi says, Adam Nidon b'chol yom, a person is judged every day. Shenemar, like it says, Vatifkedenu lebekarim, you visit him every morning there's a judgment. Rabbi Nasan says, Adam Nidon b'chol shah, a person is judged every moment. Shenemar, like the Pasuk says, L'regaim tifchenenu, means to say again, every single moment a person is evaluated. And the Gemara continues, V'chi teiman, if you're going to suggest, Liolam Rabbi Yehuda, that really our Mishnah does follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, Yehuda. And when the Mishnah talks about the different times for judgment, it's talking about the final judgment, the sealed judgment. So if so, Kasha Adam, you have a difficulty with man, because again, by Adam, the final judgment is Yom Kippur, but our Mishnah says Rosh Hashanah. If our Mishnah is talking about the final judgment, it should have said Yom Kippur. And so the Gemara says, Omar Rava says, Haytana Devei Rabbi Yishmael hi. Our Mishnah, it follows the Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael, the teachings in the Yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael. The Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael, because it was taught in the Yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael. Be'arba'a prakim ha'olam nidon, 4 times during the year the world is judged. Ba'pesach al atvu, on Pesach the judgment for grain. Ba'atzeres al peros ha'ilon, on Shavuos the judgment for the fruit of the trees. B'chag nidon al amayim, on Sukkot the judgment for water, for rainfall. V'yadam nidon b'Rosh Hashana, and a person is judged on Rosh Hashana. U'gzar din shelo nechtam b'Yom HaKippurim, and the final judgment is sealed on Yom Kippur. V'chikotani mas nisan atchilas din, and if you have this answer, so our Mishnah is talking about the original judgment following the opinion of Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael. The Gemara continues, Amar Rav Chisda says, my time with Rabbi Yossi, what's the reason of Rabbi Yossi? Again, Rabbi Yossi said that a person is judged every single day. So the Gemara says, Kiddukamar time, Rabbi Yossi gives you his reason. The Pasuk says, Vatifkedenu lebekarim, the Pasuk says, every morning the person is judged. And so the Gemara says, Anan hachi ko amrinan. This is what we were really asking. My time alo amar Rabbi Nassan. What's the reason why Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold like Rabbi Nassan? Rabbi Nassan also brought a pasuk to prove that a person is judged every moment. And so to that the Gemara says, Bechina yuna bi'almahi. The word bechina, which is the word that was used in the pasuk that was brought by Rabbi Nassan, that just means looking into something. It doesn't indicate a full judgment. But the Gemara says, Pekida nami yuna bi'almahi. The word Pekida also, Vatifkedenu lebekarim, that also just indicates looking into something, not a full judgment. So that's the same problem. And so the Gemara says, Elam Rav Chisda, rather Rav Chisda says, Taimei de Rabbi Yossi mehacha. The reason of Rabbi Yossi is from here, it's actually from a different pasuk. The pasuk says, Lasos mishpat avdo mishparamo Yisrael dvar yom biyomo, that the judgment happens every single day. That's the source for Rabbi Yossi's idea. The Gemara continues, V'yamar Rav Chisda, and Rav Chisda says, Melech v'tzibor, if you have a king and you have a congregation, Melech nichnas techila ledin, the king is judged first. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, Lasos mishpat avdo mishparamo Yisrael, again, that's the same pasuk, it puts the avdo first, the servant of God, the king is first, and then the amo, then the nation, then the congregation. And the Gemara continues, my time, what's the reason? One answer you can say is that it's not proper derech eretz for the king to wait outside. Of course, the king has to be judged first. And if you want, I could say another answer. The king gets judged before the anger builds up. So therefore the king is judged first, and then the nation. The Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yosef says, according to who do we daven nowadays for the sick and for the afflicted? So the Gemara says, Keman, who does it follow? Rabbi Yossi. It seems to follow Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi says there's a judgment every single day. So it makes sense to daven every single day for those who are sick and those who are afflicted. And if you want, I could say another answer, Liolam Kerabanan. Really, we're following the Rabbanan, we're following the other opinions as well. Maybe a person's only judged once a year. So why are we davening every single day for those who are sick? Because we're following Rav Yitzchak. The Amar Rav Yitzchak, because Rav Yitzchak says, Yafet Sa'akal Adam, screaming out is effective, Bein Kodem Gazardin, Bein La'achar Gazardin. Whether you do it before the final decree, whether you do it after the final decree, Sa'aka is a different level, and that is appropriate to do every single day. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, we learned in a Brai Somer, Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Akiva, why does the Torah say to bring the Omer on Pesach? Because Pesach is the time of the grain. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, Heviu lefanai Omer b'Pesach, bring in front of me the Karban HaOmer on Pesach, Kedei shetisbarech lechem tavua shebesados, in order that it should be a blessing for you for the grain in the fields. And why does the Torah say to bring the Shtei HaLechem and Atzeres on Shavuos? Because Atzeres is the time of the fruit of the trees. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, bring in front of me the Shtei HaLechem and Shavuos, so that the fruits of the trees should be blessed. And why does the Torah say to pour the water libations on Sukkot? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, pour in front of me the water on Sukkot, so that the rains of the year should be blessed. V'yimru lefanai, and say in front of me, b'Rosh Hashana and Rosh Hashana, Malchios, Zichronos, v'Shofros. You mentioned Malchios, you mentioned Zichronos and Shofros when you daven on Rosh Hashana. Malchios, Kadesha Tamlichuni Alechem. Malchios is the way of making me king over you. Zichronos, what's Zichronos? Kadesha Yala, Zichronechem, Lefanai Latova, so that I should remember you for good. Uvamen, how does that happen? Through what is the remembrance? B'Shofar, it's through the Shofar. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Avo says, Lama token b'shofar shel ayil. Why do we blow with the shofar that's from the ram? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Tiku lefanai b'shofar shel ayil. Blow the shofar of a ram in front of me, Kedei she'ezkor lechem akedas Yitzchak ben Avram, so that I should remember the akedas Yitzchak. Umala ani aleichem kilo akarta matzmechem lefanai. I'll consider it as if you yourself sacrificed yourselves in front of me. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, Lama token b'Rosh Hashana. Why do we blow the tekiah on Rosh Hashana? And the Gemara says, Lama token, why do we blow the tekiah? Rachmon Amar Tiku, the Torah itself says the word Tiku. Ela Lama Marian, so rather the Gemara says, why do we blow the Trua? But the Gemara says, Marian, what are you asking that question for? Rachmon Amar Zichron Trua. As far as Trua is concerned, the Torah says also, it uses the word Trua. Ela Lama token Marian Kashen Yoshvin. Rather the question is, why is it that we do tekiah and Trua while we're sitting down? And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tazayin Amud Beis.